painful, 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 missing a second deadline in terms of its earnings report, and it needs to get rid of some assets.
Well, this is an amazing story. And it starts with Steve McQueen. Remember The Great Escape? Steve McQueen played the guy trying to escape as a prisoner of war. He was playing the true life story of a guy named Alan W. Vostell. And the Alvin W. Vostell electrical power generating plant in rural Georgia is a nuclear plant that Westinghouse has been building for some time now. This Westinghouse
Great context.
That was acquired from Chicago Bridge and Iron and was acquired by Toshiba just a few years ago. But with it, they acquired this big problem, and the problem was the way they reported. There's so much accounting involved here. The cost of this plant has now spiraled from about $4.4 billion to $5.8 billion. They're building 2 reactors at this plant, and the timeline has gone all the way into 2020 till the final construction is supposed to end. So the accounting over this has apparently been screwed up somewhere along the way, whether intentional or not, and that's what Toshiba is trying to figure out.
Since 2008, right?
Yeah, and so they first announced that they had an accounting problem here about a year ago, not even quite a year ago, 6 months ago. Stock fell dramatically, and as a result, Toshiba is still trying to uncover what the problems are and how far back they go. So what they told us today is that they've figured out the fourth quarter, but they don't know if it affects the previous 3 quarters of calendar year 2016, and they have to go back and do that, and think it's going to take until April for them to figure that out.
Quite amazing. And meanwhile, they need to steady their own ship to a certain extent. They need to dispose of certain assets, bring in some money, and the memory chip one has been the one that's on the chopping board, and quite a tasty price point as well.
Well, the memory chip business is maybe the best business that Toshiba holds these days. Yeah. So it's the one they might get the most for. However, that's the one they don't want to sell because it's the best business they've got. The problem with selling this Westinghouse nuclear business is that the way these contracts work is they've got some fixed price plus 10% cost with the deal they've got with Southern Company and Georgia Electric and Power. And the problem is that the costs have been rising. They've been in a battle, the Westinghouse unit has been in a battle with the authorities in Georgia and with Southern Company about how much they can jack up the price. Interestingly for Bloomberg Technology, one of the most expensive pieces of a nuclear power plant is the cybersecurity protocol. So they were actually involved in a dispute resolution with Georgia Power and Light, where they actually went through and said, you can't increase the cost of this any more above this number, including cybersecurity. And cybersecurity alone was singled out as an expensive part of this thing because it's really an interesting story. And this new agreement here.
But I mean, buyers, Westinghouse. I mean, if they are going to take on such a potential bag of snakes, would it be Chinese, Japanese buyers that we're looking at?
There's thoughts that Korean companies could be interesting as well. It's probably unlikely that we'd see a Chinese buyer because it'd be hard for a Chinese buyer, a Chinese-owned company, to get work to build nuclear power plants here in the U.S. And so the result is there aren't a lot of companies who could be willing to take this thing on. And again, as they encounter more and more problems, it is a very tough business when the accounting's right. But when the accounting's phony, it's a really disastrous business.
And so could we be waving goodbye to Toshiba as a technology business? I mean, what more is there of tech other than the memory chip element?
I mean, fundamentally, they're going to have to figure out how big the problems are here, and that's the thing they don't know right now. And so for them to make any decisions about what to sell and when to sell it is really a requirement that they're going to figure out after they figure out how deep the problem is. The other issue here is that they have not only made price guarantees, but they've made guarantees about what their credit ratings are going to be. And so that if they lose their credit rating from rating agencies, or if it's lowered, they'll have to secure additional credit or additional letters of credit just to keep doing the work that they're already in. So they really are in a tangled mess.